Hi, thanks for joining me today. I have a special guest here in the studio, two Lisas. Lisa Karstetter is here with me today. She is going to be talking about Microsoft TechSpark initiatives. Say that 3 times fast. So she'll be talking about that with us, and we'll also later in the show have Sue Kane joining us. She is the director of Apple STEM Network in the North Central Washington area. And I was talking with Lisa recently about the things that Microsoft is doing in our area and throughout the world and country, I'm guessing, to try and compensate for the change that's happening from technology, and you're calling it an industrial revolution that's coming. Mm-hmm. So I thought it'd be good to have her on the show today and give us insight to this huge undertaking. I mean, it's hard to imagine even starting out, but thanks for being here.
You're welcome. So TechSpark. I started in December with this job, and it's taken me probably 2 to 3 months, the first 2 to 3 months, just to try to understand myself of what it is, because it's kind of complex and there's many pillars. I'll just go through the 5 pillars real quick. The first one is digital transformation, and I'll go into more explanation on those later. The second one is digital skills. The third is career pathways. The fourth is rural broadband, and the fifth is support for nonprofits that can help on the first 4. So your nonprofit support is helping nonprofits that can in turn empower those other 4 pillars. So the reason that it started was Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft. This is his baby and his team that's kind of taken it on. There's 500,000 tech jobs that are available right now in the United States, and there's only 43,000, around an average of 43,000 students that are actually graduating in computer science to fill those jobs.
With those skills.
With those skills. That's 450,000.
The deficit there.
Yeah, that they're having to try to fill from other areas. So he really kind of dug in to try to find out, why was that? And the results that came back were there's just not computer science being taught in a lot of rural areas. And in fact, there's only like around 40% of the United States, schools in the United States that actually can teach computer science.
And you're talking about high schools?
High schools. Mm-hmm. So that leaves a huge 60% of the population of students that don't even have exposure to it.
And these are higher paying jobs because they're skilled jobs, or they would start,
absolutely.
So that's something that's, if you're thinking about whether it's trades or college or,
yes.
jobs in the computer arena.
Well, and I think, Brad tells a great story, and I would encourage people to maybe read his book called Future Computed. But he talks about the day the horse lost its job. Mm-hmm. And he tells this great story about how, everybody just kind of freaked out, like the horse is not going to exist anymore, and what are the blacksmiths going to do, and what are the farmers going to do that have been making hay to feed all these horses, and the postal carriers? Well, the horse might have lost its job doing some of that. The horse just went into other areas. It was more horse racing, and the farmers went through a little bit of a dip, and the economy did, but they had to shift on what they were doing and what they were growing.
And that's what we were talking about the other night, is
yes.
like when you think about it, if you have to kind of think about it in smaller pieces, because otherwise it's very overwhelming.
Exactly.
And you were talking about how, okay, so there's no more horses delivering mail and getting people to and from, but now we have to build roads for the cars.
And bridges, and maybe the blacksmith can upskill and reskill his skills, and needed to, so that he could start building, bridges and different things that the cars, you needed mechanics, you needed tire companies. Wall Street was kind of founded around that time because you had people needed to finance for the cars and advertise. You had cars that were advertising and competing. So
there's a lot less barter going on when it's not a horse.
There's always jobs that are created on the back end. Right. What we do know is we know that automation and AI is happening really rapid, and it's really fast. So if you're not adapting and getting the skills needed for the future, you're going to be left behind.
When we had this conversation before, one of the things, and you're a farming family.
Yes.
So you've got to get with it too, right? You got to
Exactly.
keep up with things.
Exactly.
And when we were talking about it the other evening, you were saying how, okay, so automation and farming. And I'm thinking, my goodness, okay, that eliminates a lot of jobs. And that's a scary concept. But this whole thing goes back to the horse and goes back to that.
There you go.
How you recreate jobs.
It's like, what do you do with, there's weed picking machines now that are being experimented in California. There's apple picking machines that are starting to hit the market that they say will be able to pick 10 times faster than a human and 24/7. So where are all these employees going to go? And so we really need to be thinking, that's the career pathways pillar, is how do we upskill and reskill some of these employees, or those that want to, into maybe more trades. We're going to need welders. We don't have enough builders
The machines
right now.
have to be built. The machines have to be maintained.
Machinists, electrical. There's a lot of those. So trying to figure out how you do that. But on the front end, kids today need to realize that the jobs their grandparents had and that their parents had are not going to be there anymore. And case in point, you can walk into McDonald's or all of these, and they're kiosks. People order a lot from their phone. I had a DigiGirls event in Moses Lake, and I asked the girls there, can you name a profession that doesn't use technology from the inception to the completion? And we couldn't think of one. And yet, computer science isn't mandated to be taught in our high schools. So these kids, jobs now, it's like you have to know some. Even for my kids, that have orchard, they're on an orchard and they're doing farming, the tractors are GPS. They do mapping with drones. There's, John Deere Operations Center to control tractors. You've got a field clock that you're using. There are so many different things just happening just in the farming industry that a kid coming out just to go to work there is going to have some computer science skills.
Well, and the thing about not having it in high schools, sometimes sometimes we start to have a love for something when we learn it in high school. Some of us know going into college exactly what we want to do, exactly what we want to be. I know I want to do something in writing, but had I not been exposed to English, how would I have known that? So in computer science classes in high school, so these kids could get a taste of it and see if it is something that interests them, and maybe they get an entry-level job right out of high school, or maybe they decide I want to go on further to college or go to a trade school that's more fit to a specific area of their study. But if they're not taught it, how will they ever know if it's of interest to them? There's very few. I didn't look at the most recent statistics, but I believe that there's only one state, and I could even be wrong on that, but I believe you could probably go on code.org and pull up those statistics. Code, C-O-D-E.
CODE.org has a lot of statistics per state, but I think there's only one state in the union that actually is mandating computer science. And so Washington State says that they would make sure it's offered, but they're not mandating it.
And that's where some of these initiatives come in.
Yeah, so part of my responsibility is Brad Smith picked 6 areas around the United States and hired 6 TechSpark managers. My area, Lisa has the map here, my area covers Grant, Chelan, Douglas, little part of Adams, part of Ferry, and Okanogan County. So it's pretty much the same ESD or the North Central Washington Library footprint, I'd like to say. It's that same area. So my goal is to, by the end, this is a 5-year initiative, it's my hope that I will have a computer science course and an AP course, actually, in every school in my counties. And Sue can go into a little more about talking about the TEALs, but we have an area that we've done really, really well so far in, and we've doubled the amount of schools for next year that are coming on board with the TEALs program. And the concept of that is, this is a true statistic which blows me away, but in the last 2 years in Washington State, there have been zero computer science education majors that have graduated. So if people are going into computer science, they're going into computer science and they're getting a job, Amazon, Microsoft, they're going to a tech company.
Teaching it, right?
But why would you want to teach it? So, or you don't have teachers that are qualified to teach it. So the TEALS program that Microsoft pays for is, putting somebody in there to teach and to kind of train the trainer.
And that's
Sue can talk about that
technology,
more.
education, and literacy in schools
Yes.
program. So when we come back, we have a lot to cover here. When we come back, Sue Kane will join us. She, as I said, is the director of Apple STEM Network in the North Central Washington area. We're here talking with Lisa Karstetter. She is the TechSpark manager. And we're just talking about how technology is changing the job market. And you're a perfect example. Your family, as farmers, you can resist it as long as you want. And then at some point, you've got to start figuring out what your exit strategy is really to transition from how you did it to how it'll be done in the future. So.
Dear Mary Maids, please clean the kitchen, and the cabinets, and the floors, and the chairs. And I wish you could clean the dog. Colin is now feeding himself. Thanks, Megan.
Hi, Megan. No worries. We got it all cleaned up. Let's hope Colin gets past the spaghetti flinging stage soon. Till then, we've got you covered. See you next time, Mary Maids.
Thanks for joining us again. We've been talking with Lisa Karstetter. She is the TechSpark manager for Microsoft for the North Central Washington area. We showed you the map before. She basically covers all of this area here. So we were talking about how technology is changing the way everyone does business. She's from a farm family, and it's changing the way they do business as well. Now joining us is Dr. Sue Kane. She's the director of Apple STEM Network, and she also covers the North Central Washington area, which is a little different than Lisa's area, but they've been working together for a bit now, and they're here to talk about some of the initiatives that they're working on together. So thanks for both being here.
Thanks for having us.
So in the first segment, we talked in detail about just TechSpark in general, the initiative, why it's happening, and how it can be more embraced, perhaps. And your role with Lisa has a lot to do with the educational component in the actual schools. So let's talk a bit about how you guys connected and what your goals are.
Well, TEALS actually kicked off in this area.
Technology, education, literacy in schools.
Yes, kicked off before I came on board, and the ESD here has been a huge champion of that program for Microsoft, and Drs. Kane and Pete Phillips have been great at getting it out and exposing it to other schools. So I'll let Sue talk a little bit about that.
Well, so this TEALS program that Microsoft did is kind of amazing. If you're going to create that career relevance for a kid who's in a rural community, who maybe doesn't have firsthand knowledge of what a computer engineer does, they all have this mental picture of somebody sitting in a cubicle in the Amazon part of Seattle writing lines of code one after another, and they don't really know what that person's
basement
life
somewhere,
looks like.
right,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. So how do you create that kind of connection for our rural kids? And we know that they need those skills. So when Microsoft first kind of threw this idea out that they were going to use technology to bring that engineer into the classroom, and we had to get some educators that were a little bit forward-thinking and were willing to kind of take a step out there, and they built an interface, or they use an interface kind of similar to like a Skype, right? If you've had a FaceTime or Skype, except the engineer spends the first hour of their workday. Microsoft lets those engineers, if they're Microsoft employees, and some of them aren't, but they spend their first hour Skyped into a classroom to some rural community, getting to know the kids and actually teaching a curriculum that gives them all of the skills that they would need to be employable in computer science. And so they're working on coding. They're also working on concepts about user interface and digital literacy. And in the meantime, while the computer engineer is teaching the class, the teacher, the classroom teacher, is there kind of modeling student learning and asking the questions and, wait a minute, when you said this, did you mean this or did you mean this? And if a student gets stuck, there's somebody right there to kind of say, let's ask our engineer for support on this. They can kind of help negotiate and kind of fill in the gaps for students. And they're learning how to teach coding and computer science at the same time that the students are actually learning it.
And this is filling that gap that we were talking about in the first segment about how it's just not being taught, period, in schools. And if there aren't educators really there to teach it, then you have the actual engineers who are obviously being trained to teach it at some level as part of their job description and a part of their day.
They're actually getting like a volunteer, like Microsoft, if they're a Microsoft employee, has this amazing program where the school actually gets compensated for putting the Microsoft employees' volunteer time to work. So that's a neat incentive for some of the schools. It's not a huge financial contribution, but they actually, they're volunteering their time for the first hour of every day. But you hear these stories like, oh my gosh. So this woman in Soap Lake who tried this, the computer science teacher, she had 16 kids, 4 of them were accepted to computer science 4-year degrees, and they were using their mentor as professional reference when they were applying to the program, because this person spent a year over Skype with them. He knows these kids, he knows their strengths, they know him, and they could ask questions about, well, what was your training like, and what classes should I think about, what programs should I think about? So they have this social capital aspect that they got from knowing this mentor. And they do this program for 2 years. The teacher is being led by the engineer. Hopefully in the second year, teacher's taking over and the engineer's kind of being a support person, so they kind of switch roles. And then from that point forward, if they want to maintain their relationship, they can. And that person is just like a professional mentor that can drop in on them and continue that social capital aspect.
So when we're talking about, so it's a Microsoft-led initiative, and the questions I'm sure a lot of people who are watching have is, okay, then who's paying for all of this? How is it that it's going to, how is it part of your job if you're trying to get this in a school to say, okay, we try to help find the funding for it, because that would seem like to be perhaps the biggest barrier. If you have volunteers who are willing to teach it, how does that fit in?
Yeah, so there is, the schools actually do set aside $5,000 that kind of helps offset the cost for that mentor type of thing. Obviously, their time as a computer science engineer is worth way more than that. So they are volunteering their time. And the school does have to make that initial investment in the technology to be able to deliver that. So that can be a barrier. In fact, the Washington State Legislature just invested in some computer science programs, and some of them actually went towards those capital purchases to be able to expand this. We went from 11 schools that had TEALS programs to 18 this next year. And they're also trying, where possible now, to make personal connections. We actually, GWADA, Jenny Rojanasatian is the director of GWADA, actually used her membership to find a local mentor. So the Wenatchee Tech Center class that's offering TEALS, their mentor is going to be Tom Arnold, the CEO of Pet Hub. And he's going to be...
Former Microsoft employee.
Yeah, he's going to be teaching
it's a small world, isn't it?
Yes, but you have to, this is the rural part, right? We just figure out a way to get this done. And that's what's so special about the TechSpark is that Brad Smith recognizes that rural resourcefulness, if you invest a little bit, they are going to squeeze every bit of success out of it. And everything that Lisa's doing is
at least creating the opportunity.
Yes, and hopefully, if you're doing this, like she was saying, within 2 years, all of these trainers or instructors or teachers in the classroom should have enough to be able to teach that, and then they're qualified to teach computer science if that teacher, stays. But the program, it's amazing when you're sitting at Microsoft. I actually got to go witness somebody, and they're sitting in their office, and then the one guy reaches over and he puts on a button up. He's in a t-shirt and he puts the button up and turns the camera on to the classroom, and he sits there and teaches from his desk, and then when it's over he takes it off and gets back to t-shirt and
The
jeans.
kids would probably like it better if they saw him in the t-shirt and jeans, right? This laid-back job.
Maybe so, but I like that because it kind of is a superhero.
You're right.
Your alter ego is a.
Well, let's take a
teacher.
break and we come back. We're talking with Dr. Sue Kane. She's the director of Apple STEM Network in the North Central Washington area, and Lisa Karstetter. She is the TechSpark manager for Microsoft. And they're talking about these incredible initiatives. I want to, when we come back, talk a little bit more detail about the career pathways. Like, where do you see this going, and what is it's a 5-year plan to get them in schools, but what do you hope to see at the end of this?
Great.
We'll be back in just a moment.
So Pam, how's your mom doing?
She's okay. She's struggling. She'd like to stay in her house, and it's getting harder for her to do the daily chores.
What kinds of problems is she having?
Just basic house cleaning, taking care of her house, yard work, taking care of her medicine.
It does sound exhausting.
It is very exhausting, and I always worry about her.
Aging in Adult Care can assist you or your loved one to remain comfortably and safely in their own home. Contact them today to start the conversation.
Hi, we're here finishing up with Dr. Sue Kane. She's the director of Apple STEM Network, and Lisa Karstetter is the TechSpark manager for Microsoft. So we've covered a lot of territory today, and we only have like a couple of minutes left. So let's talk about how you're trying to take this grant that you are going to talk about now, about how you're going to take that into the classroom to try and further their education to get credit for what they're already doing.
Yeah, so our next big step is we've got this amazing asset in the TEALS program in 18 schools in Washington with the potential to go into really any school in North Central Washington. And we want to make sure that the work that the kids are doing in this class is going to earn them some kind of credential, something that they can show for it. So whether it be college credits or certificate, what's that next career credential look like? And so we've got a grant, and we've put together a steering team with representatives from a couple of the strong school districts that have career and technical education programs going, the 2 community and technical colleges, Wenatchee Valley College and Big Bend. And then we've even got a university partner in Central Washington who's going to kind of help us steer and see what we can do to create articulations and build some of the career pathways so that these kids can actually get recognition for the work that they're putting in, and people will realize the skills that they have
And the
as a
commitment
result.
they've made. So it's kind of like a running start or college in the classroom, that sort of thing, where the time they're spending in the classroom is time well spent. And that grant's coming from Microsoft?
Yes, so they've already gotten the money.
We've got the money, we've got the team, we are assembling and putting together and looking for feedback and input. So if some of your viewers have some suggestions or ideas, or they want to get involved, all of these suggestions are welcome.
So you see this as a way to, I think it incentivizes students to participate, right? They feel like they're getting something a little bit more out of it than a regular class.
It's amazing. The research is so consistent on this fact. The more that the kids have college credits or certificates while they're in high school, they are more likely to graduate high school, they're more likely to go to college, they're more likely to graduate college. So all of these things are good things, and we want to see more of that. So this work is going to potentially put a dent in that number that Lisa was talking about in terms of the tech demands in Washington State.
So is there anything you want to say in closing, Lisa? We have just about a minute left, about the work that you're doing, and are you receiving open arms invitations from the schools?
Majorly. And it's been great to try to find partners for me. And so the ESD, GWADA, they're just Grant County Economic Development Council. I mean, I have just found some really great partners that have been able to help me remove barriers. And that's what I found, because I'm not an educator, but my job was to go and to find the people that know that information, and let's try to solve it. And so this is a big one. I mean, we can get this out. Microsoft will teach the classes. We can do that, but let's make sure the kids get credit. And from there, we offer AP classes. Microsoft also offers those. So we're just really trying to make sure that we can start there, because as things change and as automation gets, more and more prevalent, we need to make sure that all the kids coming out of high school have some sort of computer science skills, regardless whether they go on after that. I mean, we hope they do.
Right.
but they need to have some kind of skills.
Well, I really appreciate you both being here with me today. We'll have you on when the school year gets going and maybe in the spring and see how things are going.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks
would
so
be
much
great.
for joining us.
Stay up to date with what's happening in North Central Washington. Go to the NCWLIFE community calendar at ncwlife.com.